Welcome back, guys. Oh, nice strong brew of tea. Just what I need for some decaling. So, moving along, we have, when I finished up last night filming, I actually laid down a layer of satin varnish. It's all cured up, so we're ready for decals. And there's not too many decals on this aircraft, which is quite nice. To be fair, that's the one bit I'm never really keen on, this decaling. I enjoy the results of decaling, because it really does bring the model to life, but some of them are a bit of a pain in the nether regions. Anyhow, we're doing the 211 Squadron aircraft, which is this decals here. And this top section is the common markings or stencils for all Mk1 Blenheims. So the first things first is just let's remove the section that doesn't apply. There we go. So that's one bit done. Now what I like to do when it comes to decaling is I like to do all the main ones first, and then I do the stenciling last. And I think that's probably down to the fact that you get that overall sense of how the model is going to look when you have got all the decals applied, or certainly the markings and the code letters for the aircraft. It gives you that little boost. You can start to see some serious progress being made. What I like to do is just batch cut a few out, purely to make it expedient. I also try where I can and avoid having the numbers, the decal number on the sheet when I put it in the water, and that's purely down to the fact that they can break up and get under the decal if you're not careful. So as long as you remember which one's which, then you should be fine. It doesn't take too long to separate the decals from the decal sheet. And having them all pre-cut and laid out certainly makes it quicker and easier to get all this lot sorted out. And the other thing to consider as well is if the stencil markings are quite small and won't stand out much, you can even consider, do you need to use them at all? I have seen me just putting on the most apparent markings and leaving the smaller decals that are just too small to see off the model, and that purely is just an expedience issue for getting the model done. So it's very, very easy with the main decals as well, just to cut them out. Sharp pair of scissors. And they're very easy to see where they go. And then that just leaves us with all the stencil data to do afterwards. Right. So that's all the main decals cut out and paired off. Now the other thing I like to do is I like to work basically in pairs, in that I'll do a pair of roundels on the upper wings, and then I'll do a pair of roundels on the lower wings, or I'll do the code letter flashes on the fuselage sides. Tepid water, warm water, not too warm, you don't want to break the shatter the decals. Airfix decals tend to be okay. They're quite glossy though, so we'll see how they perform. Always put them in face down and push them down to the bottom. Try and avoid them curling up too much. And we're going for the upper wing decals first, just because. So let them have a good soak and take them out. And then I tend to have, it's just an old takeaway container that's been through the dishwasher, so it's free of any grease or anything. And I just tend to set the decals on the lid to soak a minute. If we're doing the upper wing decals, we may as well do the walkways as well. Get them out of the way. Right, whilst these decals are soaking and lifting from the backing paper, we can discuss decal solutions. Now you can use, find them. So you can use Micro Industries Micro Set and Micro Sol. And just to show you how long I've had these, that bottle is dated August 2018, so that's how long they last. Some folk think they tend to lose their potency after a while. I'm maybe inclined to agree with that, but it doesn't harm to refresh your stocks every now and again. The other ones I like using, they're a little bit more potent I think, is Mr. Hobby's Mark Setter and Mark Softer. So that's your one you paint on. I think it's a PVA type base. It helps the adhesion of the decal. So that goes on first, and then you paint Mr. Mark Softer over the top to help soften the decal and make it conform to the panel lines. As well as that, I don't use the brushes that come in these bottles. If you look, they're like Mr. Cement S. They have their own brushes. I tend not to use that brush. I have a dedicated decaling brush. It's never seen a drop of paint. It has only ever laid decals down. And I have a few of these brushes spare. So it's just a number 4 round from Italieri. Nice brush, synthetic, does just exactly what you need to do, but it doesn't see paint, so there's no chance of cross-contamination between the decal solutions and your paint. Right. Tea. Let's see if these things have moved any. Sometimes with these big decals, they take a moment, but there you go. You can see now that it's lifting and it's movable. So what next? Well, I've got the marking instructions here. They're just sitting in front of me, and I tend to orientate the aircraft in the same way that the marking instructions are on the desk. And I use the panel lines as a marking guide from where to paint the setter. So looking at this one, you can see here that the edge of the roundel touches there, and it also touches here and skirts around there. So we know we need to paint that rough area. So you just go in. You don't need to use lots of it. You just want a little thin coat, just enough to cover where that decal is going to go. And you must make sure when you're doing decaling that if you've put a varnish down, or if you're decaling straight onto paint, that it is cured. because Decaling solutions can reactivate paint, or they can certainly etch into paint, and you don't want that. You'll be in a world of pain. Right, decal on, and then it's a case of moving it into position. And we know it rests just nicely on the back of the wing there and on that corner joint there. Little brush over just to help make sure we're getting any air pockets or anything out underneath it. And then the other thing we can do, you can either use a Q-tip or a cotton bud, or you can use a piece of kitchen towel. I tend to use a Q-tip. Just gently moist it, and then you want to come in and use a roll-in action and do it very, very gently. You don't want to be pushing this decal down. That's when you risk moving the decal, and if it grips because of the solutions you're putting on, you're in a world of pain. Now this decal is conforming right in front of our eyes, but I can see there's obviously been a little bit of dust or debris underneath here I have not noticed, and it's going to have to stay there because I don't think I'll be able to get it up. You can try, if you are going to try and get a decal up, water is your friend, and you just use the brush to get under the edge very, very carefully. These are fragile decals. You see I've already split this one, and we can see if we can brush out whatever is underneath there. Don't think I can though. I think that is actually in the paint. Is what it is. Sometimes you just have to take it on the chin. It does pay, if you're not sure, which I probably should have done, to just gently use a very dull or high grit polishing sponge and just run over the area to make sure there is no phlegm, specks of dust or anything that's going to get under the decal. When you're happy with the position of the decal, then come in with the softer solution and just paint it over the decal. Again, don't press down, just give it a nice even coat and let it do its thing. The thing you must be careful of is that it doesn't bead up and you get a spot of this solution in one place, because it will tend to burn through your decal. And if it doesn't burn right through it, it will distort it and you'll end up with a blemish in your decal. So you've got one side done, come back in and we'll do the other side. Again, there's a bit of hair there. Just paying attention a bit more carefully now that we've seen that there has been a bit of phlegm on the surface. I know a lot of models will, and to be honest with you, sometimes I do as well, is just give it a little polish to make sure there isn't any debris. I haven't been so conscientious on this build. So line up with a corner. You can hold it in place with a brush, pull the backing paper away, and sometimes it's easier to just maneuver it into place whilst you've got the backing paper grip on the decal. The main thing is to try and get it the same orientation as the other one, so you've got that symmetry. And you see when you start putting these decals on that it just brings the model to life, and especially with these large RAF roundels, you know, it really does add that splash of colour to the aircraft. So we're happy that those two decals are the same. I'm just going back to this one here just to avoid that softened solution beading up, so we can just gently rub it in and leave it now, because the decal will be soft, so it will be very vulnerable, and you can actually see that decal sucking into the panel lines right in front of our eyes, which is just brilliant. It's what we wanted to see. Right, next one. Get that softer solution on this decal, just rub it in right the way around the edge. And we'll let it do its thing. Right, next decal, walkways. I tend to, when I'm using this brush, just wash it in the water before I go into the solution. If I've been brushing softer on, I'll wash the brush off before I go into the setter, just to keep from cross-contaminating. So there we go, got our base layer in, grab the decal. This is quite a thin decal, so they would just gently push it so it releases from the backing paper. Now we know it sits over the first layer of rivets, halfway between the first layer of rivets and the forward row of rivets on the front wing spar. So again, just put it in place, hold it with a brush, and then maneuver it along the wing root joint, which is where it sits. And just push that over the brush. Happy with the position, just come in with a Q-tip and just gently roll that in. You can, if they're nice and smooth like these are, sometimes you can just gently brush it down with a Q-tip, and all you want to do this for is to get any air pockets out the underneath, and just to try and remove as much of the moisture from underneath as possible. If there's any steps or joints that this has got to go over, then you can just gently burnish it down. But gentle is the important word here. Decals by their nature are fragile, and they are very, very easy to damage. So we have the decal down, we've soaked up the water, we'll come in with the softer. And sometimes as I'm doing it, if I think the decal's not responding so well, I can just, whilst I've got softer on, just go back in and give it another very, very light coat, just to aid it conform into the panel lines. Right. Last one here, so that sits in here. Same position. A little too far up, so you can actually come in with your pointed tweezers, so long as you've got enough movement in the decal, and just be very, very gentle in maneuvering that decal over. You can also use the brush until it's pressed down onto the surface, then you usually are able to get a little bit of a grip on it and maneuver it into the position you want it in. So that one wants this to sit just above that front row of rivets on the rearmost spar. There we go. So that's our two walkway strips. And there you go, you can see how easy sometimes it is to maneuver that. So that's why you need the rolling action rather as the dragging action. So again, we just come in and just roll that decal down to the surface, removing the air and the excess fluid from underneath it. Just checking back here with these decals, make sure there is no beading of the setting solution. There we go. Now you'll notice hopefully that that decal is starting to crinkle up. That's a good sign. That means the decal is reacting to the setting solutions and the softness, and it is softening right up. It will, as it dries, shrink and suck itself into the panel lines. Again, it's just a case of being patient. Don't overcook it. Let the chemicals do the work for you. Right, so there we go, decaling. That is the basic way I do it. I'll now crack on and get it all done, so I'm sure you do not want to sit and watch me do the rest of the decals. I will be doing it exactly the way I've just demonstrated it. And when you come back, then hopefully they'll have all cured up, set up, and we'll have put a sealer coat of satin varnish over everything, just to seal it all in, protect everything before we start coming in with the weathering products. Moving along, aren't we? It's coming along nicely. So we'll see you again in just a little moment. Welcome back, guys. And the decaling is finished. It's all gone down reasonably well. I think I've actually put a little too much softener solution on these decals, and it's taken the sheen off them a bit. But what we're going to do is just let it all completely dry down, and then I'll give it a very, very, very gentle buff just to raise or to even the finish over it. It's not even to get a shine on it, but just to get a consistent finish over the top. But I think if you look at those decals, you'll see just exactly how well they have completely sucked down into all the details. 100% gone into the rivet holes, the panel lines, absolutely beautifully. And they actually look pretty much painted on. So we've got the upper wing ones done. We've got the wing walk areas done. There's a few little stencil details here. We've got the side done as well. Interestingly, there's that cut off bit there on the yellow outer border that the instructions don't explain it very well, but it looks like it's been overpainted by the Azores blue. So you have to run along that panel line, but it fits very, very well. We've got the code and the stenciling. They've all gone down well. The tail flashes have gone down. However, if we look at the spine of the tail, then they don't quite meet up, whereas in the instructions they say they do, but there is no way of them meeting up. So it might be just a case of finding a red that matches this signal red here, which is more of a brick red than it is a bright red, and just colouring in that bit. I'm not too worried about the white, but I certainly here around the front, just here, I'd like to fill in this gap. And we could even put a strip of white here, and there's a dot of blue at the top. But it's not going to be much to fix it, and I probably will do something about it before the next video. Underneath, we've got the two wing roundels done. And then there's one or two stencils about the aircraft. All went down really, really well. They've all had the Mr. Mark setter and softer treatment. And they seem to have conformed okay. So this is going to need at least 24 hours now for all the decals to fully cure, fully adhere to the model. And we need to do a little bit of surface dressing just on these, just to kind of even out the finish, so we don't have any rough or kind of mottled texture too much. And then it'll all get sealed with semi-gloss varnish. And again, it'll be left for at least 24 hours to fully cure up before we look at the weathering. In the meantime, we still have stuff to do. We've got the rear gun turret done, and that needs to be fitted in. It needs still to fit the gun in that. And this is an absolute pig to get in. It really is a difficult fit to this aircraft. So I think if I can get it in here, if I get it in this far, it's going to stay in. But we do need to, a little bit of work on it to get it in, and then it's obviously going to need to be varnished when we varnish the rest of this aircraft to unify the finish. We've still got the bombs to paint, bomb racks, bombs to adhere to the bomb racks, and I still need to finish painting the propeller, the governors on the boss, and the yellow tips on the end. So that's a few minor jobs to do. There are some ancillaries. The Lewis gun is here on my porcupine block, and then obviously we've got bomb bays here. We'll only put that on once we've done all the oil weathering, because we don't want these to get in the way. They are going to get weathered at the same time, so it's all the unified finish. We've got here is the main aerial mast. It's going to be the last thing to go on, along with some elastic line for the radio antenna wire. There is an airspeed indicator and a pitot tube to go under the front as well. These are the last things to be attached. They still need painting, but they'll be painted in exactly the same way that this kit's been painted. So they'll be undercoated with German grey and then top coated with the relevant colour. So it's moving along really, really well, and I have to say I am absolutely blown away with the quality of this kit from Airfix. It's definitely in my top favourite build of RAF World War II aircraft. Certainly up there alongside the likes of the Tamiya Beaufighter and the Revell Ventura I did last year. It's a stunning kit. It's just fallen together. I've had no real problems other as bringing together the canopies. That was the challenge, but I'm sure if I had built this again, I'd be able to figure out a better way. It may even be fastening the canopies to the fuselage before we even bring the fuselage halves together. That's something that could be done, as one of my subscribers did ask that question in the comments in my last video. So yeah, Airfix, well done. At the moment, gold star kit, and it's something I have to recommend to anybody that's interested in RAF World War II light medium bombers. And please Airfix, bring out the Mark IV long-nosed. You'll sell buckets of them, and you could trump all the other companies that are probably thinking about bringing it out. At the moment, I think the only 1/48th long-nosed Blenheim you can get is from Special Hobby, and that's an old kit now. That's a challenge to build. So Airfix, build on this fantastic model you've got here, and then bring out that long nose for the modelling community, because I know it will be a massive hit for you. Anyway, enough of superlatives. That's where we're at the moment. So like I said, we'll get all this sealed with varnish, and then we're going to come back with some oils and enamels, pan line wash, do a bit of fading and weathering on the panels, exhaust staining, and then we will be able to unmask the glazing and finish off this aircraft and get this build over the finish line. Yeah, it's really good stuff. So we'll see you in the next one. Cheers, guys. Welcome back, guys. So moving along, the aircraft has actually had a couple of days just to cure up from laying down the semi-gloss varnish. But to be honest with you, although it's a semi-gloss varnish, it looks quite matte compared to what Tamiya X35 usually ends up looking like. So not to worry. So we're on panel line wash time, and because it's obviously in desert camouflage, then we don't actually need a black wash. What we need is a kind of dark brown wash, and that will actually work for both top and bottom. Although if we look at the bottom, to be fair, the panel lines are showing up beautifully as it is, just with our shading techniques, so they won't actually take very much to do, but to do them I will. So what am I using? Well, I'm using a mixture of two different brands of oils. If we look in there, a mix and dish, I've got raw umber, I've got some, and that's just from Dale and Roney, I've got smoke, and I've got bear with me, cream brown from Abteilung 502. we've probably got twice as much brown as I do to anything else. And I like to mix oils to get the colour I'm looking for, just purely because you can modulate the colour you want, the strengths you want, and make it suit the build you're doing. So I'm using Winsor & Newton Sansador, get that in frame, there we go, as my thinners of choice when it comes to oil work. So basically just loaded some thinners into the mixing dish, and we're going to start mixing. And what we're looking for is a smooth, consistent wash that will flow in the panel lines without being too thick and being pasty. And at the moment then we need a bit more thinners, I think. But you can see the general colour. It's like a right grey-brown colour. So it's not too strong. It won't overpower the contrast won't just be too huge. It'll be nice and muted, so it should just help to highlight the panel lines to a degree, but also help to sort of modulate the colours. So I'm needing quite a bit more thinners to get this to the consistency we're looking for. And don't worry if you've made quite a bit of this. If you've got a clean pot, Tamiya pot, or any jar that won't react with oils, then you can save it. It does keep for a little while. So there we go. It's quite watery. If you look at it just touching down the side of the glass, it flows nicely. So when we're happy, you can see that's just a nice dirty brown colour, grime basically. Bit of a grime wash, which is what we're wanting. You can come in, test it on a panel line, and see how it goes. That's flowing nicely down the panel line, so we can just touch and flow now. I'm trying to be reasonably accurate with these panel lines because I really do want it just to stay in the panel lines, and that'll make cleanup a little easier. So just a few dots here and there, just to minimize the amount we're using. Now, sometimes I will just paint the panel lines right over it, but then that just increases the cleanup. But what it also does, if you don't get it all cleaned up effectively, it can actually act like a bit of a filter on your paintwork, and it will change the hue of the painted finish. Now that might be alright in some instances, but if you're quite happy with how you've got the painted finish on your model, then you maybe don't want to put a filter down. So it's choice. Now you can see there's a little bit of wear on the decal where we did a little bit of light sanding. So we might need to come in with a little bit of blue oil just to repair that. A little bit of red. I don't actually have red oil, so a rust brown would probably be close enough. So this is what we're doing. We're just predominantly wicking it into the panel lines. Over these rivet lines I am just going to have to brush it on. Won't really have the opportunity to do each rivet in turn, so we'll just brush it on. You can see straight away that it's dark enough, certainly over the mid-stone paintwork, it's highlighting it perfectly. And even over the dark earth, it's highlighting it. So that's what I'm going to do for the next 20 minutes, is go around all these panels, rivet lines, panel lines, joins, everywhere where there is a small recess that will wick in some of this panel line wash. And then once it's done, I've got to leave it dry about 20 minutes or so. Once it's had a chance to dry, we can come back in with our bit of moist tea towel. We can rub it away to leave a beautifully highlighted panel line of the aircraft. Once that's done, then we can think about any shading and fading we want to put on the paint. But the primary job here is just to get the panel lines done. So I'm going to crack on. I'll get the whole upper and lower surfaces highlighted. We'll let it dry for about half an hour, and then we'll come back in and we'll start stripping it off. So back shortly. Welcome back. And as you can see, I have got the airframe completely pin washed. And I've already started, so here's one I prepared earlier. And there we go, we can see how the airframe is looking now that we're starting to remove said pin wash. And you should be able to see there now that all the panel lines are just really nicely highlighted. Got a lovely bit of contrast, and you can also see that there's been a little bit of tinting, filtering work as we've removed the excess of the oil wash. Then it's left behind a little bit of a filter layer in some areas on the panels, and that's just helped bring back a little bit of the shading we built into the paint. But the other thing it's done is lifted the overall tone, so that the earth was looking a little washed out, and now with that sort of grimy oil work on it, it's just given it a little bit more richness, which is what we're looking for. You can see the difference between that and there. That's looking a little chalky, whereas this is looking nice and rich and vibrant. And I think some of that chalkiness has come about from the semi-gloss varnish. So how do we get it off then? Well, you can see I had a bit of kitchen towel, and I usually just tear them off in small strips. I don't like to, because they'll get contaminated to a degree that you'll end up just rubbing in neat oil paint. You'll also see that I've managed to knock off the flaps, so there's a good chance I'll do that on the other wing when I get to there too. But all we're doing is back and forth motion, so we're mirroring the airflow, and you can just give it a gentle rub around, and you can see it's stripped off the excess. And the panel lines, and I was saying that as we were building this aircraft, the panel lines and panel line detail is beautiful. Really, really is nice. It's just the right depth to hold a wash. To me, it doesn't look very overscaled. It's actually very much in keeping with what you'll find on the Tamiya Beaufighter kit, and Tamiya in general. And I have to say, this has got to be the best Airfix kit I've built to date, and I have built a number of them, and they are certainly coming ahead leaps and bounds compared to where they were 10 or 15 years ago. And when the towel gets a little bit dirty, just open it out. There we go, you can see where the clean areas are, and refold it so that the area you're using to wipe is clean, and that will aid in the lifting of the bulk of the wash and just leaving it in the panel lines. And the other thing to remember when you're doing this is that, as with sanders, paper will be mildly abrasive to the overall paint finish. And what you'll find is that it is going to, with the little bit of thinners on the and oil residue on the kitchen towel, it'll polish the paint a little bit, and that'll bring that satin sheen up a bit from where we were with the matte finish that was on it to start with. You have to excuse the weather. We've got some seriously heavy rain coming in at the moment, so if the microphone's picking it up, that's what you're hearing. Now, if you've got areas where you can't get tissue in, this is where your Q-tips come in handy. Fine area work. Wing roots. 90-degree joints. And the engine, we're just going to rub around the cowling. You can see we've done the underside. I've put a little bit more on the underside just for the grime that would be normally kicked up by the aircraft as it takes off and lands on the strips, dusty strips. Goodness me, a lot of water coming down. There we go. And I also tend to wear these nitrile gloves when I'm doing this, just so your fingers don't interact with the residual wash and end up leaving fingerprints. So it's starting to look quite nice. A little bit of work to do yet. And the model probably sat for about 20 minutes to half an hour just to flash off. It's not fully dry. It's dry enough that the bulk of the wash is just sitting in the panel lines nicely. The main thing is just to try and support the model in your hands, so it's not putting too much stress in any one part. You don't start breaking stuff off, because this is the bit where, when you've gotten this far and you've done all the painting and you're starting on the weathering, if you're breaking a piece off, having to glue it on and then match it back in if it's destroyed the paint or caused the mark in the paint, then that's when things get a little bit tricky. You'll notice I haven't done anything about this leading edge of the tail yet. Wanted to get the bulk of the weathering done before I do that. You can see though, with the Tamiya paint and the X35, towel's falling apart, then the bulk of the wash is coming off quite nicely. Obviously the last few wipes of the cloth, then we just drag rearwards in the direction of the airflow. So if there is any streaking, it looks natural. You might get an area or two where you rub through to the plastic, Don't worry about that too much. Small touch-ups like that are very easy to do. It's just when you're having to touch in larger areas you're going to have problems. Obviously we still need to paint the tail wheel. That'll likely end up being silver. That'll be one of the last jobs to do before we put the antenna wire on. And don't worry if you feel you haven't gotten enough off the first go round. You can always come back in with a bit of kitchen towel, just moistened with a bit of thinners, and that will then be a bit more aggressive in removing the oil wash from the airframe. Say for example if you wanted to clean a panel right down, or the wash was being a bit stubborn, like on these undersurfaces has been a little stubborn, what we can do, just get ourselves a little bit of kitchen towel and just touch in just a tiny corner there. Don't do the whole towel or they end up being saturated. You just want a little bit. You can just come in and just rub it back. But don't go over it too much. Just rub that back. And there you go. That cleans it out nicely. And then can also do a little bit of natural streaking. So any areas that are proving to be stubborn, like here, just streak them back. And then if you want to dry it off, just take a piece of dry kitchen towel and just rub it back. There you go. That's looking really nice. Really, really nice. Right, underwings. Don't worry if it looks hellish. Gets better very quickly. There you go. And you can see in that decal there, all that panel details come up. Move to a fresh bit of towel. Do the leading edge and then pull back. Do the other wing outer. Should still be a bit of a moist section on this towel. Yeah, there it is. Just come back in here with that. Coming on nicely. It's always more difficult to clean the underside of an aircraft. You've got all the engine nacelles to worry about. We've got the undercarriage as well. With this one we had to assemble the undercarriage, so you just have to take a little more time. You probably need to use a few more Q-tips to get in about these areas. If needs be, we'll just use more kitchen towel. Usually takes about a couple of sheets. You can see up here on this upper wing surface, you can see that it's still not dry fully. There's a bit of smudge there. So just the last job when we come in, we'll just go over it. We'll Mk1 eyeball, check that we've cleaned away any smudges or oil that's seeped out of a panel line. Yeah, the other way of doing it is just wet the Q-tip. And here you can work on panels on themselves. Pair of panels. That's all you're taking off. It's not a lot. That will dry slightly different from the rest of them, so it might look that's been a repair or something. The wing root here. Sometimes there's a little bit of rough texture in the paint, and you need that little extra help. That's where a moist Q-tip comes in. Definitely on the underside and around the engine. We've still got the exhaust to put in, so don't just worry too much if you've not got it all cleaned away around the engine, because these old radials, they were oily, dirty beasts, so there would naturally be quite a considerable grime build up around the base of the engine, the cell, undercarriage, etc. Now the one thing I didn't do is I didn't do these front undercarriage doors. What you can find is if you've got a Q-tip that's picking up the residual oils, you can actually just work that over there, and it will, if it's got a bit of white spirits on it, deposit into the rivet lines. If you need to, we can come back in later on and add a bit more. You can see I lost the flaps off the other side, and that was just in this process of cleaning. They just flexed enough that the glue I used to glue them in cracked. I only glue them with super glue, and I only ever do it with super glue because of that very reason, that you stand a good chance of knocking them off. And these wheel well doors aren't actually glued in at all either. I need to put a drop of glue onto them to keep them in place, and I also need to glue the tyres in the right orientation so the flat spots are where they ought to be. There we go. So that's everything moist up with the Q-tip. We'll just come back in with a kitchen towel and work into the rear. We'll remove the excess oil. Around the engine. There we go. So that's the bulk of the pan line wash done. And hopefully you can see that we now have a really nice grimy fuselage, engine nacelles, under wings. It just looks lived in would be the word I would use. It looks nicely grimed up. There we go, get it right in frame. I apologise if I've gone out of shot. It's very difficult to do this and see what you're doing in the camera at the same time, but hopefully you can see that all the work we did, if I get a pointer, all the work we did, and I'll zoom in as well, and you'll see a bit better. There we go. All the work we did when we were building up that sort of pre-shading and highlighting has left that slight differences in tone, texture and definition on the wing, and you can see it there, helping building up that picture of a used well-worn airframe. And it's the same on both wings. We look in the center as well. You know, all these panel lines have got this natural hue about them that you can put in with oil. But we built that in to the paint finish itself. So when it comes to actually doing the oil rendering, we've already done half the work. You can see those highlighted areas. You can see these leading edge bits here. You can see these hard edge bits here. You can see these panels here that we put highlights into the whole panel to make it stand out. All that work was done when we did the paint. We haven't had to do anything other as a panel line wash, just to unify all the panel lines, and kind of it almost unifies the surface coating of the paint. But all that texture, shade and definition has been built in on the painting stage, and actually the weathering stage is quite minimal. It's a very, very quick and efficient way of weathering a model, and it's something that I've done for years now, in that I'm not going to do any more weathering work on the underside of this aircraft. All I'm going to do is just finish up cleaning up these oil areas, and then when we turn over to the top surface, again you can see that we've got definition in the wings. You know, we've got very subtle I must say, shading. We've got panel line shadows. It's probably more subtle on these top surfaces than it is on the lower surfaces. I'll zoom out a bit so you can get a better picture. There we go. It is a little more subtle. However, subtle is what we want, and it gives us the option now. If we want, we can come back in and do a little bit of shading with the oil paints, just to lift any areas that have been lost in the layers of paint we've put down. But I don't know if I'm actually going to do too much. I'm thinking I am maybe going to leave this just nearly how it is, purely because I like the way it looks. And that's what it's all about. The main thing I need to do now is just finish off cleaning up the oils. There's a couple of areas, you can see them here, where we've got a little bit of surface area that is still hydrated by the thinners. And there's a few areas just in the back of these engine nacelles where I need to get in there and just clean the bulk of the oil away. But on the whole, I'm really, really happy with that. The next job for me, now that we've done all the oil painting, one that we're going to get onto very shortly, is unveiling the glass work. Because now that we've done all the oil work around the glass framing and stuff like that, it's ready for the canopy mask to come off. So I'm going to quickly finish rubbing down the oil work, and then we'll come back and we'll look at peeling off the masks, and we really then will be moving very, very rapidly along. So back shortly.